The arduous fight for better stats. Grinding. A practice that typically doesn't progress the story, but often unlocks abilities that you need to progress the story. Some think it to be one of the more fun parts of the game, while others find it to be completely unnecessary and annoying. Well, I think it really depends. And I think it's very interesting looking into why we feel rewarded, or for that matter, if we feel rewarded, for grinding. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today gameranx asks the question, why do we grind in video games? Well, there's a very simple answer. Having higher stats makes the game a little bit easier when you get to harder parts. But that's not really the full answer, is it? Mechanically, that's the full answer. Yeah, I would much rather have higher stats when I go into the boss battle. But I think if that were the only reason, it would almost never be accepted. From a game design perspective, you want to do things that keep the game interesting to people. And if mechanically speaking, all you're really doing is just doing the same thing over and over again, performing the same Final Fantasy fight in the same area of the world map with the same enemies, getting the same amounts of experience points, gradually, slowly building up, well, I'm sure some people would find that to be great. I, for one, really enjoy the Final Fantasy battle systems over the years, but I will say even I have a limit. So how exactly is a franchise like Final Fantasy able to break that limit? Oh yes, Final Fantasy reference. Yep. You know, limit breaks and all that. Why exactly do people even sit down and say, oh yeah, fine, I'll do this for however long they want me to do it? Because let's be very clear, there are some games, many popular games, that ask you to grind at some point. Not every game out there is a Game of War or an Uncharted or a Super Mario 3D Land or a Bayonetta. Just something that continually moves forward. Something that makes grinding completely and utterly optional. Now that's a list of great games, but there are also a lot of great games that specifically require you to sit down and grind for a long time to get anywhere. And that goes from single-player narrative games to multiplayer competitive games. But where there are good ones that ask you to do it, there are also bad ones, and I want to talk about the bad ones first. Specifically, why it's bad. The main reason grinding in a game is not good is because the mechanics for the game are not good. 9 times out of 10, if you have a game where you think the mechanics are okay and you're asked to grind, that's when the game stops being an okay game. Especially if you're enjoying the narrative aspects of the game in a single-player situation. In a multiplayer situation, obviously, you're kind of just stuck, and no one likes being stuck. So I'd go ahead and say that even though the aspects are probably more embedded in a competitive multiplayer situation where you might be used to them, they might be more normalized to you, it can go south much quicker there than it can if there's an interesting narrative at least. However, the interesting narrative can also prove to have a bad contrast if the grinding is boring. And I'm not going to say I haven't played a bunch of JRPGs where I thought the battle system was subpar, but I enjoyed the story, and frankly, the battle system and grinding aspects of the game did not deter me from playing them, because I was engrossed in the story, but my opinion of those games probably would be a lot better if there was no grinding. At the same time, imagine Pokemon Go if you could join a gym before level 5. No, it most certainly did not deter the majority of players, but I have to imagine there are at least a few people who don't have time to get to level 5 to do the interesting part of the game. And let's be clear, I don't find Pokemon Go that interesting until level 5. And my friends, that is a perfect example of grinding. There's a lot of reasons why somebody might not want to actually do the grinding aspect of a game. It is time consuming. It is not necessarily the most interesting thing you've ever done in your entire life. And it does take a level of dedication that you might not really want to give. Especially if, like I said, the game itself is not that wonderful. So what makes grinding enjoyable? Well, games that do it well have good mechanics, for one. Like I said, I really enjoy the Final Fantasy battle systems through the years, and I've spent countless hours grinding in those games when it was absolutely unnecessary to do. I mean, there are places where it certainly was necessary, but I would do it one way or the other. I would happily stay in a place a little bit longer than I needed to have slightly higher levels. Combining the good mechanics with the world that I like and the pretty places that I saw and the characters that I was spending time with, and most importantly, the cause that, fictionally obviously, I was feeling, that I was participating in, made me feel compelled to be the best at what I could do, at least within reason. and made me feel like I was part of something in some way. If you're really playing an RPG, whether it's a JRPG or a Western RPG where you're meant to embody that character in some way, shape, or form, if you're immersed, you feel like you're doing something that affects the world. And if you're properly immersed in that respect, and the mechanics are not boring, because if the mechanics are boring, it doesn't really matter if you're immersed in the narrative in some way, you're probably going to feel some responsibility on some level, even if it's just a little one, to do good. That's what games are supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be motivating you on some level to do good at the game. Then there's the idea that the next plot point might involve you needing to be better. I'm obviously a Final Fantasy nerd, but, let's bring up Borderlands 2. You're not required to do a massive amount of grinding in that game by any means. However, you really feel like you're in that world because it seems real on some level. People are relatable. The story is interesting. And yes, it's goofy and it's kind of absurdist, but you feel for what's going on there. And you feel like you want to assist in some way, and that compels you to say, I'm going to do this the right way. I'm going to go into this prepared. And to take that feeling into the multiplayer arena, why do you grind in multiplayer? Well, you're part of a team. Other people are relying on you. Obviously, the situation is not life or death, but you can affect other people's score and therefore affect their level. And you may not be the best player that's ever played, but you want to play as good as you can because hopefully on some level, you actually do give a shit about the people that you're playing with. I mean, after all, you share something in common. You both like this game. Depending on the game, that could mean a lot. Some games have a lot of philosophy attached to them, and some games don't. But the point is, you're playing with other human beings, and if you're not just an ass, you probably want to help out your fellow human beings on some level. After all, this world isn't really one that we can control. A lot of the time we feel powerless outside of video games, and inside of video games we can feel as though we have done something good. Even though it may not massively affect somebody's life, an assist here, a save there, it may register low on the emotional meter, but it is helping. And it's not just specifically competitive shooters or MOBA games. You may spend a lot of your time on an MMORPG alone, grinding, but when you participate in a raid, you're contributing. And on some level, it does matter how much work you've put into the game. And not just to yourself, but to other people. So why do we grind in video games? Well, I think there's two answers to that. If the grinding is bad, if the mechanics are bad, if it just seems tacked on, then it's probably there to make the game seem like there's more to do, which is a cheap tactic. Games that do that really don't deserve a lot of recognition, and they typically don't get it. But when grinding is good, it's because we feel like we're part of something, and we want to be the best version of us in that situation. Grinding is always going to be an aspect of video games, whether it's single player or multiplayer. Entirely narrative games exist, but that's a genre, that's a preference, that's a taste. As long as there is an aspect of the game that requires you to gain experience on some level, there's going to be some aspect of grinding. But if it's good, it doesn't seem arduous. And if it's great, it doesn't seem like it's happening. What do you think? How often are you frustrated with grinding, and what games bug you the most? Let's meet in the comments. I'd love to read your input on that. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button. And if you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every single day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. As always, we thank you so much for watching this video. I am Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero, and we will see you next time right here on gameranx.